What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our SEC football channel.
The Hogs are hoping to erase 2018. First, they'll have to look a little bit more impressive against themselves. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, providing, of course, the best discussion, debate, and analysis that you will find anywhere. The Arkansas spring game culminated on Saturday. We've got Andrew Hutchinson from Rivals Hog Beat on the line. Andrew, how you been doing?
I'm good. It's been pretty busy between, spring football and Arkansas basketball looking for a new head coach, the baseball team's in the top 25. So it's a busy time here in Fayetteville.
Very nice. Well, the other two programs are going to have to lift this one up at the bottom of the SEC Western Division, of course, with no wins last year in the conference, but proud football tradition. And we'll see what Chad Morris has in store for us this fall. So you were at the game. I'll leave it open to you in regards to what caught your eye. Hopefully some good.
Well, honestly, it was kind of boring. It was a really boring spring game. But honestly, you can't really read too much into it because there were several first-team guys out with injury, held out just as a precaution. A couple of key guys that have yet to make it to campus as well. But what we did see was the defense dominating the offense. It was first team versus first team. They didn't try to split it up or anything. It was mostly it was basically an offense versus defense setup. And so it was really disappointing what you saw from the offense, especially early on in the first half. There were some flashes. Trey Knox is a four-star wide receiver, early enrollee who has impressed throughout the spring. And he made the biggest play of the day with a 45-yard touchdown. He caught it a little drag route about 4 yards down the field, caught it in pretty good coverage against the first-team defense and juked the starting safety Cam Curl and took it to the 45 yards. So that was probably the highlight of the day. Several other early enrollees made some big plays. So that was probably the biggest, most encouraging takeaways that these guys have come in. Guys that should still be in high school and be, as all the coaches say, preparing for prom, and here they are making big plays for the Razorbacks.
Trey Knox, 3 catches, 57 yards. He's the 19th rated wide receiver coming out of high school out of Tennessee, according to Rivals. And as you mentioned, a big 45-yard touchdown reception from one Ben Hicks, who is, of course, the transfer from SMU. And do we expect a quarterback competition, or does Hicks pretty much have this locked down?
Well, during the spring, he had it pretty locked down because he was pretty much the only guy they had. They do have some other guys like John Stephen Jones, the grandson of Jerry Jones, the Cowboys owner. He's a legacy here in Arkansas. He has made some strides, but Ben Hicks is clearly the number one guy during spring. A guy who started, the two starting quarterbacks from last year's team, Ty Story and Cole Kelly, have transferred out. They are now, I think, Story is at Western Kentucky, who actually plays Arkansas this year in a crazy twist of fate. And Cole Kelly went to an FCS program in Louisiana, his home state. But the other quarterback that started the game last year as a true freshman is Connor Noland. He's been busy this spring pitching for the baseball team. He's in the weekend rotation and only made it out to, I think, 4 or 5 practices this spring. So obviously, he wasn't in the mix. He was actually in Auburn this weekend and didn't play in the spring game. But they do add Nick Starkel, another graduate transfer quarterback. Arkansas is kind of in a unique situation in that they're bringing in 2 grad transfers at a key position. Ben Hicks obviously has the experience with the SMU staff, or this current Arkansas staff when they were at SMU, with Chad Morris, Joe Craddock, the offensive coordinator, and then, of course, Starkel comes in from Texas A&M, where he started several games for the Aggies. He has experience in the SEC. I think the fall is going to be very interesting to see how that 3-man battle between Hicks, Starkel, and Noland goes, because I think it'll be interesting. I think Hicks will end up being the starting quarterback at the beginning of the year, just because he has the experience. He's gone through spring. But I do think Starkel will compete and eventually take over that starting job, with Noland also being in the mix.
Yeah, I had a brain freeze there for a second. I knew that there was somebody in line to compete with Hicks, and I couldn't remember who that was. And, of course, Nick Starkel at one point actually beat out a quarterback in Kellen Mond, who had a nice red shirt, I believe. No, that would have been a sophomore season for him last year and eventually took the team to 9 wins and a bowl victory as well. And Nick Starkel went toe-to-toe with Kellen Mond. So he's going to have something to say about this. Hicks is coming off a season in which he threw for 19 touchdowns and 7 picks, 2,500 yards for the Mustangs. I also see here, Andrew, that Devin Bush, another 4-star, you mentioned Trey Knox, another 4-star in the fold, 21st rated cornerback out of New Orleans, had a pick 6 off of the aforementioned John Stephen Jones.
Yeah, he did. It was really, I don't know if there was a miscommunication with the, I guess it was a tight end on the play, Grayson Gunter, I believe is who it was intended for. It looked like John Stephen thought he was going to break out, and instead Gunter kind of settled in and stayed where he was. But still, you got to credit Devin Bush for reading the play. He knew exactly what was coming and stepped in front of the pass. And, once he caught it, he was off for the races. They actually blew the play dead before he could return it, but they ended up calling it a pick 6. So, yeah, he was the guy who made another big play. And another true freshman early enrollee who caught a big pass was Shamar Nash. He's another 4-star wide receiver. Caught the only deep ball of the day. I think it went for 48 yards. And then also a couple other early enrollees at defensive end made a sack or two. Eric Gregory and Mateo Soli, both of those guys had sacks. So when I say that the early guys, made plays, they truly did. I mean, it wasn't just a tackle here, tackle there, small catch. I mean, it was big plays when they emerged. Now, will they be able to do that against an opponent? It remains to be seen. I think Trey Knox is going to be a stud. I'm not quite sold on Shamar Nash yet. I think he can evolve into a great wide receiver, but I think he's going to maybe need a little bit of development. And I think obviously when you're talking about guys in the trenches, defensive ends, it's hard to come in and contribute right away unless you're, a 5-star guy. But I think these guys are capable of, you'll see them at least play in the 4 games that are allowed now in the redshirt rule, and maybe even, get in the rotation and play quite a bit this year as true freshmen.
You mentioned the miscommunication between Jones and Grayson Gunter, the tight end, but they did hook up for a 23-yard touchdown pass. Gunter caught 4 passes last year and a touchdown in a redshirt sophomore season. So he's coming back into the fold. We got Andrew Hutchinson on the line from Rivals Hog Beat to help us out with the Arkansas breakdown after the Hogs went toe-to-toe with the Hogs, and the defense won it 39-33. So, Andrew, not just looking at the spring game itself, but, of course, there are a number of scrimmages, I believe 2 that precede the spring game. Everybody gets their 3 full contact or what's close to full contact. Everybody backs off, but allowed scrimmages. And then, of course, the 15 practices or something in that range. What were the major storylines for you? I know it's kind of difficult, and there's only so much access to the play on the field in practice, but in regards to what seemed to be the biggest storylines or what came out of camp overall?
Well, we already touched on Trey Knox. I think that was probably one of the biggest, positives to come out from an offensive perspective. And obviously you've got Ben Hicks coming in and trying to mesh. But I'm going to go ahead and give you one that we haven't talked about in McTelvin Sosa Agim. He's a defensive tackle now. He came in. He was a 5-star recruit, according to some services, coming out of Hope, Arkansas. And he's had flashes throughout his first 3 years. He hasn't quite lived up to what maybe some people hoped he would do, but he has had flashes. And now he was a guy that some thought might go enter the NFL draft after his junior year last year. Decided to come back. He had been flipping back and forth between defensive end, defensive tackle. He is now full throttle at defensive tackle. I don't think he had any tackles in the scrimmage yesterday, but he had a couple of quarterback pressures. The coaches have praised him throughout the spring for not only emerging as a leader, being a senior, but also being very consistent. They've got guys throughout the roster who have really good days, but they'll follow it up with not so good days. And Sosa, I guess, has cut down those not so good days and brought it just every day in every practice. So he's a guy that I think Arkansas is really counting on and hoping on having a big senior year up front on the defense.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the Hogs. We've got Andrew Hutchinson on the line from a Hog Beat. You can catch him right there on the Rivals platform for Arkansas athletics. Expectations this year coming off, again, a winless SEC schedule, 2 wins overall. Disappointing also out of conference that you lost to 2 group of 5 schools, especially the North Texas game that wasn't that competitive and had the infamous fake punt return that everybody saw Arkansas get duped on. I'm looking at the results from last year, and they pretty much play out the way I remember them. There were a lot of blowouts. About half the games were blowouts where the team was just not prepared to play that kind of opponent in conference and get just, Mizzou 38-0, Mississippi State 52-6, and on down the line. Then some other efforts where it was a one-score game against quality teams, like top 15 teams like Texas A&M 24-17, LSU down the stretch, one of the 5 or 10 best teams in the country, 24-17. So there were some signs there. So, Andrew, as you catapult toward this August, what can be the expectations for 2019?
I think the number one thing is you avoid those really embarrassing group of 5 losses. Colorado State, that's a game they led, I think, by 16, 18 points and then blew the lead in the fourth quarter. Then North Texas, you mentioned, was just a blowout, very embarrassing for Arkansas. I don't think they're going to have any games quite like that in 2019. I think they have a really easy non-conference schedule. It's probably one that teams from other conferences will probably look at and point, well, Arkansas doesn't play any Power 5 teams. Well, Michigan had been scheduled, and then they canceled that to resume their rivalry with Notre Dame. Probably a good thing for Chad Morris, because if Arkansas and Michigan played this year, probably would not be pretty. Instead, you get a game against Colorado State. I think you get San Jose State. Portland State's the FCS team. And then I think there's another state that's mixed in there that Arkansas should be able to win those 4 games. That doubles your win total from last year. Obviously, Arkansas fans want to at least make a bowl game. That's going to require winning 2 SEC games. You do get Kentucky on the road. Kentucky, coming off one of its best seasons in school history, lose a lot of production. But it is on the road, so that's going to be tough to win. You do get Ole Miss again. That's a game they probably should have won last year, and it's a game that Chad Morris has pointed to as saying that's probably where we realized that kind of took the wind out of our sails and really led to the really lackluster finish against Mississippi State and Missouri to end the year. And so I think that's a game that's winnable. You get Missouri at home at War Memorial Stadium in Little Rock, actually. That's a game you might be able to win, but it's going to be tough. I probably wouldn't pick them to win any of those games yet. I think they might be able to steal an SEC game, but I think right now I'm thinking 5-7 is kind of the ceiling. They could get to 6 wins. It wouldn't completely shock me, but anything more than 6, I would be pretty much floored. It would be a spectacular season.
I got to tell you, Andrew, every couple of weeks, I get another comment from some of the videos that I cut preseason in which I made my predictions across the board for all the Power 5 teams. And I picked Arkansas to go 5-7, and Arkansas fans just grilled me. They just went nuts that they were going to win 7 or 8 games. And of course, they would have been happy with 5-7. And of course, you just pointed out the formula that's been a formula for a lot of borderline schools like NC State in the past to go 2-6 in the conference, win the 4 easy non-conference games and get to bowl play, which would be sneaking in the back door to an extent, but this is where the program is right now. And certainly that would be a huge improvement that's tangible. Certainly the school might, the team may just notch a couple more wins, but be remarkably better. So we'll just have to wait and see that they can eliminate, again, as you say, not necessarily win the games, but be competitive week to week and limit those 30 and 35 point losses. Andrew, we appreciate you stopping by, breaking down the Hogs. Would love to have you back sometime this summer before we get set for August camp.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate talking the Hogs, and maybe we can do that sometime this summer.